Hey there, listeners, and welcome to season 2 of Project Zero. The goal is the same as last year. We're going to hear the journeys of some of the best project leaders in the game. But this season, we're doing something a little bit different. We're digging in a little bit more on how AI is having impact on the industry. So my name is Alex Tuck, and I'm the host. And I am here with the Director of Product Management at Safety National, Stan Ponder. Welcome to the podcast, Stan.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about your Project Zero. All right.
I'm looking forward to it. This will be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Stan, start us off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at, and the work you do.
Yeah, I have been at Safety National for about 2 years now. And as you led off with, I lead the product management function, which includes roughly, it's an 800-person company. And we have about 20 folks that are in the product management, product ownership space. And so that's the group that I lead. I've been there almost 2 years. I love it. We're building this product org from the ground up. And even though it's product and not project, obviously there's a lot of overlap. And I brought a lot of my project management background with me into this space. I've been in product for, give or take, the majority of the last 15 years or so. And but that project management background has definitely helped pay off in spades.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to hear about that. And for all the listeners out there is so much overlap between project and product. And actually, I think a lot of misconceptions and conflation about what the two things are and what they're not. And the hope is through these conversations with folks like Stan, who are now running product, who came from project, they can talk about the project management skills that they need in the product management space to help everyone understand the difference between the two. So,
right.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So tell us where it started, Stan. How'd you get into project management?
My journey has been a bit of a different one. I actually started my career out of college as a 5th grade teacher. Did that for almost a decade and then moved into being an elementary school principal. And it was there that I realized that there was a lot more that I wanted to do. And to be honest, the hours, working a lot of hours, was married. My wife was pregnant with our first child at the time. And I realized that something had to give. I couldn't work 16 hours a day and be a good dad. So I started to really look at where did I want to go and what transferable skills did I have? And to be honest, it wasn't a direct leap into project management, even though I, as an educator or planning curriculum, there are some really strong transferable skills there, but I wasn't ready in my mind yet. I hadn't made that connection yet. So the first thing I did was get into learning and development. And I was managing within a few months of being a learning strategist, building online curriculum and things like that. I managed a team of instructional designers. And in that was hardcore project management, even though I didn't realize it at the time, but I was learning all of these skills to be able to coordinate efforts as they came in and make sure that my team had what they needed to be successful, assigning people to these different learning efforts. That was my first foray into project management, was in that learning and development space. And I don't think people, at least I didn't at the time, recognize how much project management I was already learning and doing on the fly without having any of the formal training. And then when I got that formal training later, I said, I really could have used that in my last job.
100%. That progression, it sounds unique, but honestly, I have so many colleagues who came from education, some form of education, and making that leap from like formal education into L&D, into project management. It's a progression that I've seen quite a few times. And so anyone that's listening out there that's interested, like there are a lot of folks like Stan that have done that. Very cool.
Absolutely.
Very neat. I like to ask this question. As a kid, did you feel like you gravitated towards being more organized, or is this something that you've practiced and learned as an adult?
A great question. So I am the oldest of 4 kids myself. And so I found that when the 3rd, 4th child comes around, your parents just get tired. And so there's not a lot of that energy to organize and plan and those kinds of things anymore with those younger siblings. So a lot of that is handed off to the oldest to say, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do that, or drive your sister here, or drive your brother there. And so a lot of that is started fomenting those, I need to plan my day out because I've got all my things I need to do, but mom or dad are asking me to do these other things. So as a kid, I will say that there was some form of that was always baked into me. a couple of quick, funny little things that evidently I used to do as a kid. I played with Hot Wheels a lot, and evidently I would line them up perfectly and organized by color. When I would eat M&Ms, I would open the bag of M&Ms and I would organize them in rows by color, and I would only eat one color at a time. So there's always been some version of organization and planning evidently in my life. And I guess this is just how it manifested.
Oh my God, that is so awesome. And I have two kids that are just like that. And I'm very interested to see what occupation they go into. And two that aren't like that.
Who would have thought organizing M&Ms could turn into a career path?
That's right. That's right. That's so cool. Oh, speaking of turning into a career path, let's talk into your Project Zero, right? And so for all the listeners out there that haven't listened to the show before, Project Zero is that first project where things clicked, like maybe things fell apart and you learned a lot from the failures you had. Maybe things went really well and you just nailed every single challenge that you faced, or something in between. So anyway, Stan, tell us about your Project Zero. What was it?
Yeah, it's a little embarrassing to talk about now, but the benefit of hindsight, you realize that you were doing the best you could with the information you had at the time. So I've gotten over that embarrassment now, but I was managing the learning and development team, and it was in a banking supervision kind of area. And one of the things that we were trained to do was write curriculum to help bank examiners be able to really evaluate the liquidity positions or feasibility and then how they were doing some of their bank examinations. So we had a bunch of different projects. Each of these were small-ish. You would take maybe 3 to 6 months to do these. So there were multiple that would come in, hit my team at different times. And I thought I was doing the right thing because leadership at the time was saying, you need to make sure that we don't want to say no. We want to make sure that we can keep these things flowing forward. What I was trying to do was not have any stopgaps and just continue to try to pepper as the next thing came in. Who's got the most availability? Who's the right person to do this? So I'm trying to parse out and do capacity management, which I wasn't realizing that I was even doing at the time. And we finally got to a point with two of those small efforts that I would call my overall maybe program, but Project Zeros. And one was, we had a situation where my folks were just tapped. I had hit the limit of how comfortable I felt giving them any more. But yet I was pressed to really get this urgent thing going. And so I talked to two of my best folks and said, guys, hate to ask this, but you know how important this effort is. You know how big this is for this client. How do you feel about taking this on? And they both agreed, I'm willing to give 50 plus hours a week for the next couple of months to get this done. And then here I was thinking, look at this, solve the problem. We did have project managers on the effort too. And the project manager that I got to work with, and I've learned a ton from, was a military veteran. He came from the Air Force, and he was always very direct with me because we had that good relationship. And he had worked to ensure that we had that good relationship where he could say exactly what he was thinking. So he walks into my office, slams the door. I just found out about your latest project. I said, tell me more. And he said, it's my job to tell you, you are building a boat with a hole in it, and you are building a boat with a hole in it. Okay. And what he made me realize is the fact that, yes, I had done capacity planning, and yes, I had thought through that it would take extra time for these folks. You're not building in buffers. You're not building in all these other things. Like, what happens if one of them gets sick? What happens if one of them's in a car accident? What happens if, this one thing that you thought they could get done in a week takes them 3 weeks? So there were all of these other contingencies, all these other things. Like, I had built an airtight plan, but it was an airtight plan where nothing could go wrong. And that was one of those things that you're building on hopes and dreams, and you can't do that. So that was one of the big ahas for me. The other one that was similar to that is, like I said, we were doing learning and development, and we were asked to do an effort that was slightly outside of learning and development. And it wasn't anything that my team had done before. And so when the client asked me to do that, I said, let me talk to my boss. My boss said, no, we can figure this out. This is something we can do. And I probably in hindsight should have trusted my instincts and pushed back a little more, because I gave it to the team. and we struggled and we spun, and we ended up charging the client. We ended up having to eat some of the cost because what we were doing was we were spinning on it. We really didn't make a lot of headway on it. We eventually had to turn it over to them half done anyway. And so it was one of those that it never felt right. And I would say the lesson learned from that, the aha from that moment was when you are a project manager or a manager who's doing project management, which is what I was at the time, is to really take that lesson of if it doesn't feel right, it may not be. And sometimes the best thing you can do is pull the plug early on and save that reputation. And that was one of the things that, while we didn't kill our reputation, we certainly did not help it at that point.
That's so good. Such a good piece of advice. Project managers have this spider sense, and it's not because we have anything magical in there. It's just that we have access to a lot of information, right? If you're doing the right thing, you have access to a lot of information. If it doesn't feel right, even if you're not a developer, you can still tell that like something doesn't feel right here. Our guest last week, Jordan, she said the exact same. That was her one piece of advice. If it doesn't feel right, raise a flag and figure out a way to challenge it, like different ways to challenge it. So I love that advice.
Absolutely.
Love it. That's a really interesting one. You've mostly worked in financial services for quite some time. Now you've transitioned a little bit, but do you have any other interesting projects, like as you started to move up and into program manager level that were interesting, worth talking about?
Oh yeah, there's been a bunch. One of the things was one of my favorite ones was we got to completely revamp a banking supervision program. So that was one where we rewrote this, and it was a combination of online learning as well as in person. And so I got to go to DC, and it was bizarre because when I was an elementary school principal, it was in a relatively rural area. So when I would look out the window of my office, I would see farmland. And then I'm helping rewrite this examiner program. And I'm sitting in Washington, D.C., and I look out the window and it's the White House. It was this unbelievable culture shock. So that was it was an amazing experience to be able to play even a small role in helping that happen. Another one that I would throw out there is we got to redesign a website that was used for training and things like that. It was ironic that after I moved out of the L&D space, one of my next efforts in product and project management was around training. It was around a website though, but it was after the 2008 financial collapse. And the Dodd-Frank Act was passed in 2010. And it was constant changes to bank regulations, constant changes to things like that. And so what ended up happening was we were on the cusp of making sure that these things were put out there so that people knew what those changes were going to be, and they had to be quick and they had to be down and dirty. It wasn't really super refined things. We tried to make it look as good as we could, but it was more important to get the information out quickly. So that was a great project to kind of learn that sometimes speed is going to be more important than making everything look polished and perfect. Another one that I'll throw out there, and one of the other experiences that I got to do is I got better and better at program and project management. I actually got to lead a global, what we called a guild, which I would call it a large community of practice, for about a year and a half. And that was thrilling to be able to bring together over 1,000 folks globally for conferences to learn and really help each other get better at the craft. Obviously, I didn't have all the answers, but pulling together folks and trying to problem solve. What are you seeing on your app? If you swipe a card in Singapore, and what happens to that data? And then one of those related things, and I'm jumping from one to the next because there's so many that I've been excited and just lucky to be a part of. So cool. Is on the financial spectrum. Like one of the things that we were able to do was we were able to set up how data was aggregated, because one of the big things, and this is still an ongoing thing in a lot of areas, is there are a lot more country specific regulations on how data is managed. And so for me, I came in and didn't know a lot about what data governance worked and data privacy and all those kinds of things, and learning about autonomous zones and learning a little bit about how do we set up our data to make sure that certain aspects of data stay within the country and don't leave it if that's the country's regulation or laws. and then what can be pulled out and aggregated with the rest of the world's data that this company would own. So those are so many learning opportunities, so many times where I've been able to come off like I actually know what I'm talking about in conversations with family and stuff like that, or friends around. Yeah, I actually understand a little bit about that industry. And I think that's one of the most amazing parts about project management and product management is that when you really get good at the skills to do those roles, you get to actually learn a lot about other industries, how things work behind the scenes. And it's been a fascinating journey for me.
Oh yeah. So fun. That's my favorite thing about, especially like even as a consultant in the project management space, it's even faster paced because you have multiple clients constantly and just learning all the little things that make our world run, right? Like it's just unbelievable. Like banking alone, what you just described, like credit card transactions and things like that. There is so much work that goes into that.
So much work. And down to milliseconds. If you're pushing a change and it takes half a second longer, that's way too long because that means that somebody standing on the other side of the world is going to sit there and watch that little spinner thing when they're trying to get their card going, and they're freaking out in their own brain going, oh my gosh, this card about to get rejected. And no, something we just did made things slightly slower. You know, the speed at which all of this stuff has to work is just amazing to me.
Yeah, it's so fun. Cool. All right, let's get into some advice here. What do you think the number one skill is for project managers, or let's even expand that to product managers if you'd like there, Stan?
It covers both, and I'll say communication skills. And it sounds so cliche, but I will tell you that I have worked with people that are brilliant project managers or product managers, but if they can't build relationships and be able to clearly communicate where there are issues without trying to light something on fire, I think that is the number one skill set that I think can bring you to that next level. And I'll give you a quick example of that. When I was earlier on in my career, we had a weekly status meeting where we would go through all of our ongoing efforts and do the whole red, yellow, green status and why they were in those things. And I had one that was dragging, and I made it red. And a couple of my colleagues saw the report before it got in front of leadership. And they said, Stan, you are not really going to go in there and call that thing red, are you? And I said, but it's red by every definition. And they said, the boss is not going to be happy. And I said, but I thought the boss wanted the truth. And so they convinced me because, like I said, I was relatively new, and I listened to them, and I made it yellow instead. And even then they were like, "You sure?" And I said, yes, I can't call this thing green. So went in, and yes, I did get some very tough questions, but fortunately I had the objective facts in front of me, and I was able to at least hopefully relatively clearly communicate what was going on and what the problems were. And he did call me off to the side later and said, I'm glad you brought that forward. A lot of people are afraid to make anything other than green. And I really just need to know if something's going sideways, because somebody higher up on the client side may call me directly. And if I don't know anything, then I come off, and I say, appreciate that. That was another thing that I really started to do too, related to this communications piece, is I actually learned that feeding my bosses anecdotal information could sometimes help them out if they were getting ready to have a conversation, or because I don't know who's going to contact them and when. So I've made a habit of just pinging people on the side and saying, hey, here's where this thing is. And just so you know, in case somebody calls you, and they're always like, thank you so much. This is excellent. I'm glad you do that. So it's just a little thing that I've picked up over the years. And I think that's just adding to that communication piece.
Yep. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh my God. So much good stuff there. Yellow and red projects get help. Green projects don't get help. If you say you're green, you better have a way to fix that on your own. So I love that. I love that story, Stan, because to learn that earlier in your career, that's a strong skill, right? That's why you've gotten to where you are. It's so much fun to like learn from all of these little projects throughout your life, right? And the idea of the show is maybe someone can learn from you, so they don't have to learn the hard way in the field. And sometimes you have to learn things in the field. But I was at PMI Global, and I was just like, floating the idea of a podcast. We were almost done with season 1. And I talked to someone and they're like, "Oh yeah, I've been listening to your show." And I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, like I've already like implemented a couple of things from people that I heard on your show." So that's awesome. I love it. Yeah, I think it's been a very valuable resource. So thanks for sharing those stories.
Of course.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about AI. A lot of companies are spending a ton of money on AI and they aren't getting any results. They're wasting time, they're passing slop to their teammates. How do you think AI is going to progress within project management in the next couple of years? Or what are some ways that you're seeing AI really being used well in the space right now?
That's a great question. And I really love what you said about passing slap on. And I don't remember where I heard this. It certainly didn't come from me. But if you're using AI like Google, you're already behind. And I don't know where I heard that, but I thought that was a great piece of advice because I think that's for most people in the entry world. And as they're first learning about how to use AI, that's their go-to is I have a question. I'm going to type this in and I'm going to get an answer. And generally what you get is a mishmash of a lot of different sorts because it depends on where the AI is crawling to get that information from. There's a lot of famous things where I don't want to name any companies here, but where it was crawling Reddit. And I think we all know that Reddit has some factual areas and then some that are just intentionally nonsense. But AI didn't have the capability at the time to tell the truth or tell the difference between the two. And so there's really good stuff there. But to get back to your question, I think that what I'm starting to see people use in the project management space is really starting to use agents a lot more to do some of the lower level analysis of things like plugging in your capacity management and the research that you've done to better project out what you can get done over a period of time, using it to take any other raw data that you have and having it do a first pass at the analysis. So those things that used to, or project creating status reports, just having have an agent ask you the same questions every week, and then it generating the status report for you in seconds instead of it taking half a day, which in my early days, that was the norm. You had to go out, dig and find all that information. And then you had to go and update manually whatever tool you were using to create it. So yeah, I think to me, it's making those lower level, the more administrative tasks go by in seconds to minutes to maybe an hour max instead of your entire day, which means you can function and work at that level where you need to, which is, again, I would advocate communicating and building relationships and making sure that you're removing the roadblocks from your teams.
Yeah, I love that. I love how AI is taking some of the mundane, monotonous stuff that we did as PMs. Everyone thinks that like PMs love to pull together spreadsheets, status reports, and stuff like that. It's like all of us hate it just like everyone else, but we like the idea, the synthesis, and we still get to do that. We don't have to go through transcripts and meeting notes and things like that anymore, right? Like speaking of agents, like we use ClickUp, and so they have this super agent feature. You can build these super agents in minutes and they're robust. And our team built a super agent that just sits on top of a project, grabs all the comments, all the transcripts from all of our meetings, summarizes the status, identifies any risks or issues or any sentiment that feels off in the project. And it's identifying stuff way better than we probably even could,
Absolutely.
Especially if we were taking notes and doing things like that. Like now we can focus on facilitating the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really love what you said there about like the fact that we don't like those any more than anybody else. I think, but we love the end result, right? We love how a good status report looks at the end, but I compare it to when I mow the lawn. Getting out there and actually mowing the yard is like a terrible, laborious, I just, no, thank you. But then when I'm done and I sit on the patio and I look out at the backyard, I'm like, wow, it looks great. My yard looks really good. Yeah, but man, and I will say, I'm also glad I have a 15-year-old that does that for me now. So now I just get to sit on the patio and watch him do it.
No, I think there's a special subset of people on the planet that enjoy like a perfectly manicured lawn, and I'm one of those too. I don't mow it all, right? Like I leave a lot of it to pasture, but there's some sections that I want it to be perfect so we can play soccer in the backyard, right? That's awesome. What's the coolest way that you've seen AI used? It doesn't have to be in project management, just any cool use of AI.
Yeah, I will say like some of the agentic AI that's coming out now is really exciting and I can't wait to start diving in more to it. But the ability so for example, I know not everybody who listens to your podcast is in IT, so I'll try to keep this in more generic terms, but the ability to have a bot that is actually looking into your code base before you push any changes to a website, and it will diagnose any changes that need to be made, will automatically make those changes and then push all of that to production. So that way you're, as a human, and you use that bot to help generate the code too. So you have these series of steps that used to take days. And, I'm one of those people that I remember being on calls until 2 a.m. when we would push code to production. And it was 6, 8, 10, 12 hours sometimes to walk through and do all the validation. And now they're setting up a series of steps. And the thing that I think a lot of people fear is, wait a minute, this thing just creates all the code, pushes all itself. Why do we even need humans? And you still have to have humans do gut checks on those things. So can you automate this to go create the code, push the code, test the code, all that, all on its own? Sure, you can. But a lot of places have recognized that you still need that human that will do that gut check, that understands, can think at a different level than the AI does, so that it makes that part easier. But it is greatly reducing those manual steps. It's greatly reducing people's time so that they can focus on the more creative aspects of designing and creating websites or applications, as opposed to doing the mundane manual testing that they used to have to. So it's a time saver, and it gives people back that ability to do the things that they love. If it's done right. Let me put it that way. If it's done right.
Yeah, I think building on that, the other night, everyone was sick in the house, and so I was the only one that was unscathed at the time. I got eventually, but at the time I was up and I was like, I'm gonna do a little vibe coding. Right now, I'm not technical at all. Never gotten paid to write a single line of code, but I built a couple of apps and they did stuff, right? And I'm not gonna go out and sell this thing or whatever, but it allows for us to enter areas that we were always kept out of, right? And so I heard this awesome song that someone made in partnership with AI, right? And it allowed for them to flex this like creative muscle that because they like to consume music, and now here they are able to create music in partnership with AI. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there where it can be abused too, but I'm seeing some really cool applications of it for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are definitely a million things that I could go into around governance and around privacy and around things around the dangers of AI. And then there absolutely are. And when we need to make sure that we heed those and think about those. But yes, like you said, there's a lot of opportunity too.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So it's been a really good show. I'd love to hear if you could go back in time and talk to young Stan. Is there one piece of advice you'd give? It could be about project management or just about career advice in general. What would you have told young Stan?
Young Stan should not have boxed himself into a corner. Young Stan needed to understand what transferable skills were. And I think to me, when I was able to unlock that, and I'll be honest with you, just like with my project management skills, I appreciate the kind words you've used throughout the show. But I'll be honest, I wouldn't be where I am without the help of a lot of other people, a lot of very talented people. But one of those was when I was feeling stuck in the education space because I didn't know what else I could do. I had somebody sit down and tell me to do this. And in the industry, it's called this, it's called this, it's called this. And just understanding that I did have transferable skills. Now, yes, I needed to go and build on those, and I needed to get training, and I needed to learn the right way to do all those things. But I had that mindset. I had that skill set already baked in by what I was already doing. There's a whole lot of opportunity to shift across laterally as well as there is that. And I would say the other bit of advice related to that is not every step needs to be a step up. Sometimes taking a lateral step is the best thing you can do for your career. If I had only gone principal, next step would have been administrator, like at the central office. And that's not a job that ever really appealed to me. But by jumping over into L&D, then project, then product, right? They are all lateral steps in one phase or another. And it got me to where I am today, which is a place where I absolutely love.
That's so cool. I love it. Love that. Two good pieces of advice, Stan. That's great. Thank you so much. Those are so much good stuff to pull out of this. How do people get in contact with you if they want to follow up and hear more stories?
Yeah, this is so I'm just on LinkedIn. And so I would love it if people, if you heard this and anything resonated with you, reach out on LinkedIn. I'm not somebody that is trying to make a career out of speaking. I just want to share what I've learned because, like I said, I've had so many people help me. I want to do the same. If I can speak to you or to your group or to somebody like that, I'm always happy to do that. So anything that you've heard that may have been beneficial, like just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect and talk and maybe speak at an event that you're having. I've done that many times and always enjoy.
That's awesome, Stan. Thanks so much. Thanks for sharing your stories and your advice and opening up. It's been such a fun show.
Yeah, this has been great, Alex. Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. And thanks to all of you who joined us this week at Project Zero. Be sure to subscribe to Project Zero wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll catch you next time with another great project leader story.